I'd like to call the Historic Review Board meeting for February 24th to order. Members present are
Vicki Yates.
John McLaughlin.
Ken Basinger.
Todd Iceland.
And Christina Robertson Gardner, planning staff.
We have 2 items on our agenda for public meeting this evening. The first one is public improvement in the Kanema neighborhood, curb and gutter along 3rd Avenue. And
Okay.
I'll let Christina present the staff report on this.
Thank you, Mr. Island. This came to our attention last Tuesday or Monday. And John Lewis, Public Works Operation Manager, is here tonight in place of Nancy Krushauer. And I'll do a brief background of what I know of the project, and then I'll kind of hand over the presentation to John, and then I will play a little Vanna White on the PowerPoint for him. And we have a bunch of photos that I took and then he took before. There was some stormwater issues along 3rd Avenue between Ganong and Hedges. There was a previous project that I know I had been working with Public Works for some stormwater drainage pipes underneath an existing culvert and some sewer work, if I can remember correctly.
It was water, drinking water.
Drinking water, okay.
And sewer.
And I had been working with Public Works to get SHPO approval for some underground work, and they were going to be going through some existing stone culverts, and the State Historic Preservation Office last fall made some findings that work inside the underground culverts was not an historic resource that they viewed as part of the National Register District. They viewed stone work above ground as being contributing. So that's how they differentiated, and we got a little letter from SHPO. And since that process for some underground pipes, the January stormwater event happened, and John can give a little more background of what actually happened in January during those 3 days of rain. And they had some buckling of 3rd Avenue. The solution that Public Works came up with works to mitigate the stormwater issues, but it potentially adds a new street improvement in Kanema that has not existed, which is a curb and gutter. And that is where we are tonight. We asked Nancy Krushauer to put a stop work order on the project to allow the Historic Review Board to review the proposal, give advice and consent. And if there was not consensus tonight, then this would be sent to the City Commission for further review. So kind of what my goal as staff is to get, if you, find out if the board has clear direction from within your group, and then is there a consensus between the board and the Public Works, and can there be agreement met tonight that meets both parties' needs? And if there can't, we need to move forward with the next steps of how to get resolution on it, because this, just so you know, we do have a stormwater pipe above ground, it's not really a situation that we can have for very long. I mean, whatever is resolved needs to be resolved. So we're kind of working on a tight timeline. Doesn't mean you have to make pressure to make a decision tonight that you don't want to make, but this is definitely a in the process project. It's not in a perfect situation where we have something proposed that the board can kind of mull over. There was a stop work order and the forms are poured. So I'm going to hand this over to John Lewis, and when he's done with his presentation, you'll be able to ask questions, and then I can kind of be brought in during the discussion. I'm going to move over to the PowerPoint.
All right. Well, thank you for having me tonight. This project, and actually what I handed you is some construction drawings of the original project. And John Burrell is sitting behind me here. And John, you're welcome to climb aboard here as well if you want. But John Burrell was the project manager for Public Works for the water projects. And the way we package these is usually we do several contracted water projects every year, and this happened to be one of them. We installed several feet of water line, and we also installed what we call a pressure reducing valve. So if you look at this page C6, the pressure reducing valve is the box that's shown about almost, it'd be just right of Hedges Street on that plan view. So you'll see that box, utility vault, in some of the photographs. But in process of doing this water line project, we were also neighbor, I think a neighbor, might have been Paul, I'm not sure, somebody suggested we take a look at the sewer line. So we also added a sewer line to this project. So far we've got water, sewer, and then storm came pretty late in the game as well. So that's what we're kind of here to talk about. So we're calling it the, at least in this presentation, Street Improvements for Storm Mitigation at 3rd Avenue in Kenema. And what you're seeing there is a before and after picture of Kenema. So before, there was an edge of pavement with gravel shoulder. The water line was within about 2 feet of that gravel shoulder. And with that new water line construction and with heavy amount of rainfall, this damage occurred during the
New Year's
January
Day.
New Year's Day storm event. And so I'll go into it much more detail, but this picture over here represents the pavement being undermined by all the erosion that was washing down the edge of the pavement. So if we could go to the next slide. This is my very rough sketch, if you will, of some of the damage. Coffee Creek comes down through this big parcel here, across this big parcel, under this house, and then finally goes back, stays, you can see the creek, and then right about in this area it goes underground. And then there's the culvert that's shown on this drawing that actually crosses here, and it makes its way down to across Hedges Street and down and back. It's fairly convoluted and old, very old storm sewer system. The creek that's shown here is a little misaligned. This was probably, there's a lot of tree cover there, so I think originally it was mapped not real clearly. But this arrow right here kind of represents where during that New Year's Day storm, the water actually started leaving the banks of the creek. And it also, I mean, really from here to here, where it then goes underground again, it was overflowing the banks of the creek. And you'll see pictures, not of the overflowing, but I'll show you some pictures of some of that. And then, of course, typically you're going to have a lot of water running down Ganong Street, and then collecting along this side and along this side of the roadway. There is a little catch basin right here, but I was trying to figure out whether that was connected or not. I don't think it's plugged, right? So really, any of the water that comes down 4th Street, down Ganong, hopefully we don't see too much of this kind of overflowing regularly, but what we do see is a lot of water that comes down, groundwater that collects along these steep hillsides, that collects and permeates through some of these walls. And I've talked to this neighbor here, and he says during the wettest time of the season, even if the creek's not overflowing, there's typically water kind of permeating through the walls and just kind of collects. It either overflows off the edge of the pavement, or in this case where it's so heavy, it inundates it inundated all of these areas here and kind of washed a lot of gravel off the shoulder of the road. Can we go to the next slide, Christina? So I just trying to give you some perspective. This is a steep street. This is Ganong Street, looking down at the area where there's an existing guardrail here, and then the curb is kind of down here. This is behind this fence is where that stream goes underground again, and this is one of the properties who got flooded and who had a lot of water coming, creek water staying as surface water, not necessarily going underground, and coming through his fence and through the rock wall he has along here and through his landscaping and all kind of gushing across here. Next slide, please. This is that one corner that I was talking about. So we're in a backyard right now where Coffee Creek is turning from a fairly steep downgrade, turning and heading towards that property that I just showed you. And this property owner had a lot of, I know he had some flooding in his structures, but definitely in his backyard. So all that water was coming out of the banks. I think this was a last-ditch effort to kind of keep it in place. But a lot of, what I would say, movement of some of these smaller cobbles from the creek that essentially kind of fell into the creek and then created that, we lost our channel basically in that creek. So that water was kind of coming up and out of the creek. Next slide, please. This again is that backyard. The fence line that we were looking at, Ganong sits over here. This structure was built, many years ago. I don't know how long ago, Paul, maybe you know that, but a long time ago. Okay. So this channel is very narrow. There was some other pictures that weren't great that I had, but this is about the widest point in this channel. It gets narrow up here. There's a little neighborhood, well, not neighborhood, it's just a private bridge that crosses this channel. And any blockages in here, I don't know that we had any blockages in here that night, but it was just too much water for this system to convey. And so all that water kind of moved up and through, splashed out. Again, I don't know what was in there. We found a lot of rock in this channel that had moved its way down the creek. Next slide. This is, again, that pipe that we were just looking at sits on the backside of this fence, crosses Ganong, and what we saw was water coming through here. The back of his house flooded. We saw a lot of water coming through here as well. So extreme event, very flashy little creek, fairly large basin upstream here. So I would say that there's areas in there where there's, really, I mean, that property owner with the sandbags in his backyard, he's already talked to me about how to maybe move some of that material back up onto the bank where it kind of belongs and get it out of the channel. So all that water kind of rushed across here and along that fresh asphalt and fresh trench and eroded along the edge of the pavement all the way down. So we'll see some more of those at the next slide. Again, these are before shots. You can see where there's the edge of the pavement. There's a lot of vegetation that's grown over that edge of the pavement, and I'm raising that because I suspect that'll continue whether there's a curb there or not. I think that might help some of the situation to kind of screen some of this. This is just kind of down the hill from there, still looking up the hill. So there's that same shrubbery as that right there. This is a head wall for a culvert that crosses. So all that stream water typically comes across, goes underground, gets into this culvert, and then makes its way across hedges underground. And right in this area is where we're proposing to tie in with this new curb system. So we want to carry that curb up to where the guardrail is, down to this point here. And you'll see we have a new catch basin that's installed, actually sitting right at that location right there, and it also is tying into the tying into the old culvert. Next slide, please. So this is another picture of. It actually doesn't look like this anymore because we've gotten in there, and you'll see our formwork. But typically, on that steep of a grade, you've got nicely compacted gravel, but hydraulics and water create erosion, and we got a bunch of it right here. Next slide, please. This is the PRV vault, which I talked about, pressure reducing valve vault that was installed in the waterline project, and we had erosion all around that. And so this is a new facility. This cabinet is a new facility. And again, we're really just depicting some of the erosion that occurred. More erosion. This is washout, some of which is still there, I noticed, but because this picture was fairly recent. But this is just down. If you're standing on that PRV vault and looking over the edge of the hill, it's quite a steep drop-off, which is part of the reason why we proposed a curb. And that's washed the fresh gravel and some of the old gravel as well, and washed it into this property owner's yard. This is the what kind of guns? The gun shop. This is a picture of some of the construction. It's a little bit out of order, but this is some of the construction activity that's going on right now. This is at Hedges right now. Go ahead, John.
The curb formwork is at the
Right, so this is the bottom end of the curb work. There's that catch basin that I was talking about sits over here. And, one of the other things about this is right now all the water, typically it's not going to include water that comes out of the creek, hopefully. It's runoff that comes down Ganong and forth, and this roadway goes up into the park system, the Kanema Park. Is that Kanema Park? Yeah. So there's a break point up there, but really quite far up the road we pick up all that runoff, and what doesn't run off the edge of the road runs down this edge and runs into Ganong, and from time to time you'll see a fair amount of gravel scattered across Hedges Street just from all that runoff. Next slide, please. So there's Hedges Street. It was after the cleanup. So if you'd seen this the day after New Year's Day, I think it looked like a gravel road. There was enough gravel in that roadway to, it looked like a gravel road. I think it even went out. It even went out into 99E. So the flow line is comes whipping around that corner and just carries whatever it's got with it kind of out into the street, and that's something that we'd like to remedy with this solution. So here's formwork in place at a standstill at this point in time, and the intent was to put a curb and gutter, set that curb and gutter just slightly high, because our plan is to do an overlay on this roadway as well. So John had the engineer place the edge of the gutter 2 inches higher than the existing grade, and then we'll put an overlay over all of that. And the intent was for a city standard curb and gutter, which is a 6-inch curb, typical concrete. Next slide. Again, this is more formwork. There's the PRV vault. This here is some, we found when we were doing the sewer line, we found some problems with the culvert, in that there was large voids in and under and around that culvert. So John had the contractors build this bypass system to bypass that culvert while we could get some concrete in there. So that just happened to be in the picture. It's really not an issue at this point in time. And that catch basin sits right about here now. There it is. So this catch basin would pick up, it's an oversized catch basin. It's more than what you typically see. It's not only got a grate, but it's got this wide opening here. So the idea is to pick up any runoff that comes down that roadway. And if we had an event like the January 1st, hopefully it would take it all, but it might not. It might continue to creep, but we wouldn't have the erosion problem that we were concerned about. And right now, that's just connected here. More form work. Again, to me, there's not a lot of shoulder, at least in this area. You get a little bit more back in here. That PRV vault sits right there, and the intent would be we have to pull in there from time to time to test that and service that vault. So we'd like an area to pull off and actually park a utility vehicle without blocking the roadway. So this curb would stay standard curb. There's a short segment that we've talked about adding more of an approachable kind of curb, but still this PRV vault sits pretty high. So we have to kind of somehow transition the grade change from the back of the standard back of the curb to the top of that vault, which is even higher than the top of the curb. Next slide. Okay, so I guess the question is here, we see this being a stormwater problem that exceeds what has been proposed already, which is an asphalt berm. The other problem we have with asphalt berms is they just don't last very long. So they break down, they break off. There's likelihood that it would be there, but there's also the concern that it just won't handle the capacity that we need to pick up all that runoff. So we think the right solution, and I would say this is something that I advocated for even though John was managing the project. It was like, wow, we've got a problem here. I think the right way to solve that is a curb and gutter. And so he moved down that path, and I got to be honest with you, I never thought twice about the fact that this was a historic district, and in hindsight that sounds like the right thing to have done, but I still believe, after considering the historic value, that there's for one, there's the historic homes and the viewpoint looking out over that curb is already compromised, and so any distraction, I guess, if you will, that this curb might create seems minimal to me. And the stuff on the other side of the street is clearly got historic. You see that from my perspective as non-historian, you see the historic significance of that, but it's kind of across the street. And this area here, I believe, is going to be. It won't be the center of attention to somebody that is looking for the historic significance of the neighborhood. The other thing I want to mention about this curb is, if you remember the guardrail at the bottom of the hill, some of it looked new, some of it didn't. We had we've had several accidents there in the snow and ice that have run into that guardrail. We've had to replace that. That liability continues down the hillside. If you got enough snow to exceed the the height of the curb, then we've got a problem. But our feeling is that curb provides some protection from vehicles that are sliding down the hill. So secondary thought maybe, but I believe that's a good advantage to keep in the curb that I don't think an asphalt berm's gonna do for us. And so trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add to that. I guess I'll open it up to questions.
I do have one question regarding the debris that ended up in the Coffee Creek section between Hedges and Miller Street.
Okay.
The stream bed was completely filled and overflowed, and I know of flooding in at least 5 properties there and a fair amount of property damage that resulted from that.
Right. So, go ahead.
Will this project, does this project have as a goal to prevent that from happening in the future?
Well, what we saw in the creek was significant in terms of debris. That's typically about a 5-foot channel, and it was filled to within maybe 18 inches of its top with debris. Debris that made its way down that same channel, but not necessarily the debris that we see in some of these pictures and that came off of this hillside. I believe most of that, I could be wrong, but most of that ended up in the street. Some of it may have ended up in the creek, but I think the majority of the debris that we found in the creek washed its way down from the Coffee Creek area and not so much along the shoulder of the road.
Okay.
But that, that's not to say that there wasn't some gravel, because like I said, it looked like a gravel roadway on Hedges Street. When I first saw it, I was amazed at what we saw. And so I wouldn't sell this project as a fix to that problem that you're talking about.
I have a question, if I may. The PRV vault, when was that installed?
That was installed as part of this water line
I see.
project, and I think we had it up and running a couple of months ago.
October of 2008.
Oh, that's been a while. Time flies.
And
It was put in as a backup water supply system for that, from people from Hedges down, their only water supply was over the hill, like near Jerome. If anything happened, they're out of water. And Ganong, the water system that came down Ganong ended there. So we tied them together, but it's a much higher pressure up on Ganong. So we put that, if anything happens, we can still feed them with water, and it'll reduce the pressure so we don't go up to water heat.
And once the project is done, is that vault, is the top concrete part of the vault going to be filled in so it's going to be level with the ground, or will that stick up the way it is now?
The curb helps, because the curb is 6 inches higher than what the edge of the pavement would have been, so the curb helps, but it's still, that's the area that I feel like we need to make that transition from the top of the vault, which sits here, to the top of the curb, and at the point where that's the most difference, I'm guessing there's probably 8 inches of difference, so you see that top of that vault. We're also sticking a curb in just on the, or not a curb, a catch basin in on the other side of that, and there's some opportunity for some transitioning on there as well, but it still sits up fairly high, yes.
Before it got washed out, what we had done was we backfilled all the way around that vault with 3/4 minus gravel. And on the downhill side, it was probably 18 inches. And what we did was there was a bunch of those basalt blocks that we had to remove from the top of the channel to put our water line across. I had them save those. And what we did was we lined them up. If this is the PRV vault, we lined them up across the bottom and made like a stair step so we could backfill up again, because it was so steep. I figured that gravel would just wash down, so we built up a little block wall on the downhill side. We filled up to the wall, and we filled in behind it, just made a little like retaining wall so that we could slope up. And we probably had about 3 or 4 inches at the most showing around the edge of the PRV vault when we were all done backfilling, and that's the goal. When we get done here, we'll rebuild the wall so we can backfill and steps and camouflage it as best we can.
But it'll still stick up a little bit.
You see about maybe 3, the lid is 8 inches thick, and we end up seeing about the top maybe 2 or 3 inches just on this edge right here.
Okay. My last question is, just south of the PRV vault where you have that, so I've got my own little picture. You have that, I wouldn't call it a curb. I don't know what you called it that was there before. What did you call that?
It's kind of the head wall for the culvert. think. That concrete wall, can we back
Oh,
up? by any
yeah.
chance?
Was that exposed before all this
Right.
happened?
Yes.
It was.
Yes, there's one on the other side of the street, you just can't see it, they've stacked rocks and kind of landscaped around it, but there's one on either side of the street.
Right there.
Yeah.
This right here is, I mean, I'm guessing at one point in time, they had this, this culvert built, but they may have let it run open, you know, between here and then there's another culvert that crosses it, hedges. And I'm guessing it used to run, you know, open channel before, and then when they built this structure, they piped it. So now there's a connection point that's basically a round culvert pipe that extends and takes it down the hill. But I think this was the head wall for that original culvert.
Thank you.
And I know there's some people in the audience who might want to make comment tonight, too.
Okay. I'd like to open it up for comments either for or opposed to this proposal.
Could you bring up the slides?
Yeah,
that
sure.
show
Just
this
let me know
out,
what you want,
please?
Paul.
For the record, can you give your name
Yes,
and address?
for the record, I'm Paul Edgar. I'm the Land Use Chair of the Kenema Neighborhood Association, and the complainant that drew attention to this. The reason why we did, and the reason why it's an issue, is that there are alternatives to pouring a concrete curb and gutter system along through there that are historically appropriate that could fit in. There are no other places where we have concrete curbs like this in the main section of the only National Historic District in Clackamas County. It is important in historic preservation for us to take steps to preserve the character of the district. Directly across the street from this are very significant historic structures, houses. If this was some other circumstance, we might be saying something different. But in fact, a couple of these houses are the most significant in all of Kenema. So anything that detracts from them has a problem. I would like to turn around. My house is also on Coffee Creek, and part of the property that Coffee Creek runs through is right going through my property. I was there. When John was out there trying to help, and I cautioned him about the high water right on Fifth Avenue because I didn't want him to get sucked into the pipe. Candidly, he was out there trying to be heroic, and I was out there, and I drove through the whole area that evening while John was there going through it because I wanted to stay on top of it. It's an anomaly. First of all, what happened has not happened in 150 years. To turn around and say that it's going to happen again, we have to look at what the word anomaly means. But it's never happened before. I would also turn around and say, I'm not a PE, but I've gone through a lot of heartache and heartbreak, even understanding putting sewer lines down steep slopes. And when I was told that you put a sewer line down a steep slope and you cut it in, you put your 3/4 inch minus or whatever it is, if you do not build brakes across it, it becomes, in effect, a raceway. In effect, when they put this new vault in October, they didn't do what is good engineering practices. When we put in Kenema, all of the fiber optics, I spent a great deal of time because it went right in front of my house talking to the PEs, all of the engineers. And when they went down through the steep slopes and through this, they not only compacted, but they put slurry, a slurry I don't know how many of you people understand what the term slurry means. But for those of you who do not, it is a mixture of concrete and sand that they can virtually pour into place, and it hardens around these properties in this area. And when you have high water and washouts, it doesn't go. That was not used. That was not good. That's practices that is employed and were not used in this case. If it had been used, this would not have happened right along that area. Listen, if it had been used and had we put in any type of reasonable abutments, it would not have washed out. So now we're being asked to put a sterile concrete curb in the only National Register Historic District where none has ever existed. We were in a process to do this without getting a certificate of appropriateness, which is part of city code. There has been historic efforts to bypass city code, and if anything, we can't allow that to happen, and it had to be brought to the attention of the HRB. That's one of the key reasons why I did this. But when we come back to say, are there alternatives to this that would not detract from this only National Register Historic District other than sterile concrete? And the answer is plain and simple, yes. We have many types. You could have stamped concrete that looks like it's stones. You could do a lot of things and still even use concrete. But you could put a wall along through there. In all other cases, we have used in and around Kenema, not because we wanted to, we've used asphalt berms, i.e. Mickey Mouse curbs. I agree that they're less than adequate, but we're trying to do whatever we can to maintain the image of this historic district and do it appropriately. What I am concerned about is that we do have impervious surfaces all the way across up above the bluff. And we have not addressed stormwater adequately throughout the whole city. In fact, in Kenema, we've asked over the last 10 years for a water survey to take place in all of Kenema so as that we can identify our problems and get them addressed. Before we go off, in a sense, in some investments almost half-cocked, we should be doing what is right. Right across from my house is a wetlands pond. It is not identified as a water resources in Kenema. Right up the street where John went up and talked to the homeowner, directly where before you go into Old Kenema Park, water comes off of his driveway down through the street 7/24, 365 days a year, and when it freezes, it's an ice skating rink and it's dangerous to the public. We have this all along 3rd Avenue. So it's not just one little isolated problem. Before we go into some of the stuff, we should have a comprehensive view of what we're doing, how do we do it, and what is appropriate to ensure that, in fact, we do something that maintains what we have, a National Register Historic District.
The water resource study has been mentioned a number of times in previous hearings on different subjects, but that really is not something that we can deal with in this board. That is perhaps a city council
That's beyond our
issue.
purview.
Yeah.
But the failure to do these things are part of the, we just don't,
But that's not our board's
Okay.
purview at all. Is there anyone else that would like to testify in support or in opposition to this proposal?
No, okay. John's were adequate.
Okay. I guess at this point, we'd like to close the public hearing and I'd like to entertain any comments or questions.
Well, a question for Christina is, has the city attorney, or can you express an opinion as to the applicability of the HRB process to this kind of
What I
improvement?
told Larry Patterson is I do believe that this falls within a
Okay.
major, and my finding that I believe this falls within a major public improvement is the board has always been cognizant of curbs, and since I've been working here, that's always been a discussion, so it's something the board, and the way I look at it, actually, the way I see the curb versus the like PRV or the new catch basin is, the curb is a new element, whereas if, I don't really see as the board purview to put a new catch basin in as long as it's, at grade level or give or take a couple of feet above grade. That's an existing city infrastructure. There really is no other design than a catch basin. So, I mean, there's certain things that, we're going to have to defer to Public Works, especially when it is at grade or slightly above. I think when the Historic Review Board gets involved is when there could be alternatives to a design solution, and especially in this situation, when a new element is being introduced in the district. And so it has been my contention, especially with my background with the HRB, that this is a major public improvement. Now, the City Commission, of course, this can beg, their further definition. The way we've always viewed it is if it's above ground, it's up for discussion, if it's a public improvement, and if it's above repair and maintenance or small tweaks. So that's how I've always approached it to the Public Works Department. That's why I see this one a little different. So I think the board does potentially have purview on this.
It's kind of tough because, I mean, the road there historically was not asphalt either. It was a dirt road.
Nor was the guardrail.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Um,
The curb, I think, is, it's a safety element. It's not like we're putting in a sidewalk and, improving the complete right-of-way there.
The question I asked Nancy Crushauer last week is I said, if the board, and I don't have a necessary opinion one way or the other. I think it is a new element. The question is, does the new element, is it mitigated by its stormwater mitigation, how it's built, and when it's all done, will it visually go away? And that's kind of, I see what the board is looking at. I did ask her if she would be okay with an asphalt berm, if that's something the board wanted to go down as a response back. And what she told me is, yes, they could do an asphalt berm, not knowing the how long it would last. But what she wanted out of any discussions that happened tonight is if the board wanted to go down that path, then they would kind of give an acknowledgement as if the asphalt berm did not work, then Public Works could come back with this curb design without kind of having go back to the board. That's kind of was her preference, if more of an asphalt berm was pursued.
Can I speak to that, or is testimony closed on my behalf? or-
Well,
It's closed, but we could reopen it. But I actually do have one more question for you, John, as well. If we went with the curb design, as you guys have it formed up, just the standard C-type curb, what about going with a colored concrete mix that was similar to what you guys did at the water line going up Coffee Creek above South End Road?
Right, so I'm, again, not sure that Nancy's completely on board with an asphalt curb. She recognizes that there's a fair amount of cost associated with changes in that, and then it's back to, is it effective for the life of the curb? So one of the things that we talked about was there's lots of options with regard to colored concrete, and I recommend something that's more of a mixed concrete so that it's colored through and through, so if it chips, you don't
stain.
have a surface that then all of a sudden looks chipped all the more obvious because it's not colored deep into the concrete.
Those
So
abutments on South End are beautiful, the way those were done.
right. I'm not familiar with those.
The water line that goes up there, I know, you probably know it, John. Next to the falls? Oh, it's sewer line, okay.
Yeah.
I was saying it was water line.
They color those? Okay. The same could be, I just printed off, I just went and did a quick web search before. Colored concrete is to me, a good compromise, because if the concern is appearance or detraction from appearance, you're right. We've already got asphalt there, and we're going to have new asphalt there pretty soon.
not a very
And
attractive
it's not
guardrail.
very historic looking when it's brand new, but it functions much better. So if we could somehow blend that with a pretty dark pigment that would turn that, to look almost like asphalt, that's to me a good compromise, and it gets it still maintains our concern about safety and maintains our concern about stormwater. Now, where the catch basin is at, there's no color pigment that you can put onto those. They're pre-manufactured, so there'd be that white spot right there. But
You can stain them.
Pour some buttermilk on it.
It'll
and let it
grow
off.
moss pretty.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
Do an
that's
acid stain.
that's the other thing. If you look in the Kenema neighborhood, so much of it's shaded that just about anything, especially if it's got water near it, gets covered with moss pretty
Well,
quickly.
Exactly.
The, what was it called?
The PRV vault.
The vault.
The older part, the culvert, that concrete wall.
Right.
That's been there that blends right in.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, I think color pigmentation to this job's, probably $1,000 ad or something like that. They do struggle with it a little bit because they got to mess up their plant mixing process. But if that's what it takes, we would be open to that idea.
In
actually,
the
it's mixed in the
Kenema,
truck.
Well, some of it is, some of it isn't. But you're right. Some
For
of
this kind
some
of
of them are.
quantity, right.
in the Kenema Neighborhood Association meeting last Thursday, the discussion came around to stamping the concrete, putting a stamped finish on the concrete. Are you familiar with that? Strictly a decorative process.
Well, typically that happens on flat work. It can happen on vertical work as well, but this is a first of all, we wouldn't want to stamp the channel itself. So you're talking
Right.
about stamping just the top of the curb basically, because there's formwork on the face of the curb. And while they peel
Well-
those while they're green, my thinking is, I guess, I mean, it could be done,
Okay.
but it seems odd to me that it would be needed, because I think, give this a couple of years and it's going to be covered with moss. So
It
you'd
will.
spend a fair amount of dollars on stamping that and trying to tool that and make it look like what? What is it that
Well,
we want
more
to make it
brittle.
stand?
The suggestion was to tool it to make it look somewhat like the retaining wall that's there on
Right, on hedges. Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't think you would get that look, not unless you wanted a taller curb.
You said you're going to asphalt the entire road, or just the cut in?
The intent, I think, is to go across, the road's in not great condition, so in order to do what we're going to do with that raised 2 inches, we need to really kind of take that across the full roadway and actually up into the intersection of Ganong and Third as well, so we need to take that up the roadways. What do you
We
mean?
would,
The-
from Ganong down to the orange crossing area, basically shed towards the new gutter. And just past that is a break in the road, and then we would do it as a crown, so it would drain both ways.
Pitch.
Past the culvert. So, do that catch basin, and the shed would really be very efficient.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at the crown of this road, right now, it does shed a little bit this way. But with this project, the idea would be, from what I'm hearing from John, is to actually take most of that water over. So we don't have erosion now. Also, we don't get much, but we get some along that other edge, and this should help some of that. But color is a good option. I still, I know over time that this curb is not going to be a detraction from the historic significance of it. I mean, I see that up there. I definitely do. So,
Oh, what other people think. I don't see it as a big, I think
I don't know, the
coloring it would be.
new
Well,
information
the-
has
the
been
first
presented, so I don't
question-
know if
Oh, I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Gregor wants to comment any further.
Mr. Edgar?
I think, I think we can do better. I would love to try to see some options offered up that would be as historically appropriate as we could possibly get, just to see, are there options, visual options, that will be more appropriate? And if we could examine that, because we have a lot of, they wouldn't do this in Williamsburg, or they wouldn't do this in any other area. And why should we be stepping backwards in historic Kenema? Why should we? And why can't we start looking positively and proactively at alternatives that we can use down the line and be smart about it and understand what it takes? That's all. I just believe that looking at it this way is going to be a major distraction, no matter what anyone said. We've never had this before. Never.
Can I ask you what your idea would be?
I think that's something that gives it some texture, something that makes it not look like it was concrete. Much like what Ken said, maybe there's some way that there's something that could be done, but let's come up with some ideas. This is erupting and coming before everyone very, very fast. Let's give it a chance to figure out if there are other alternatives that are reasonable and make sense. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I guess close the public hearing at this point and open for discussion and deliberation.
Well, the first question would be, do we want to take this on, or do we want to dump it on the city council? Personally, I think we can handle it. I think it does fall within our jurisdiction, and I think that it's an issue that we can deal with. And I don't know if we need to take a vote on that.
Well, I'd just like to get everyone's input on
Okay.
how we
Well,
proceed.
it would be nice if the curb could be stamped, but that doesn't sound practicable. I think colored concrete is a good alternative. I would hate to see the city put in an asphalt berm and then have to go to the expense of redoing it at a greater expense sometime later. Also, on that street, there are other concrete walls, right down 3rd Street. On the left, there's a blue house that has a big concrete wall right in front of it that's a deeper color, like that curb, I call it a curb, the culvert. And I think if the curb had a pigment that would blend in with that, I think it would be very minimal distraction, if any.
Can you go to, I'm kind of hung up on the guardrail. Can you go to the picture
Sure.
that shows the guardrail?
That's not before us.
I know. I want to see how that relations, I want to see the space of it, where it's at.
I can't tell you what it is.
No, I'm just trying to see where that is, how close it is, that one picture. I just want to see it. There. That's what it is. How far down is that curb from the guardrail?
The guardrail goes probably, John, you remember, it's maybe another 10 feet.
And then the curb
That
starts.
way,
To the
and
left
then
side,
curb
yeah.
starts. And we are planning, because we need to make sure we pick up all the water that we carry that. We chose not to, because of that guardrail, carrying the curb further up the hill was problematic, so.
I was trying to figure out where that is, how close it is to the curb. The curb pretty much starts right at the end of the guardrail.
Left side there.
We lined it up at the end of the guardrail and then coming to the head wall, so that the
Gotcha.
line, and it actually was widened that pavement by about a foot and a half to get back to solid ground. We go past the water line eventually.
It does drop off there considerably.
John, what is the practicality of leaving this excavation open for a period of time if a decision has to be made, choices regarding other options? I see it as a safety issue, standing open, but then there's just the basic practicality of your job.
Yeah, I know John Burrell is working, negotiating the change order. The change order for the curb work is negotiated. Leaving it there is just delays, which typically result in some dollar amount. They're finished with the sewer work. It's just kind of sitting there right now. If there's enough rainfall and enough
Another
water,
flash flood.
if we start washing out from under those forms, then
Okay.
there's a redo of that work. So I don't know what the actual cost is, but if we're talking a week, I guess it's just a matter of time. Hopefully, we don't have an event that washes the material out. And I don't know. Is there anything else the contractor told you that would cost them more money by waiting for us?
Yeah, it's just basically remobilization of the concrete side out there. Right now, we're renting these forms because we can use them somewhere else. Today, when it was raining, I was out there just to check. We still have some of those sandbags up at the top where it first started to wash out, so it's redirecting some of the water into the road. And it wasn't a significant amount of rain.
John?
You could see what-
Would you mind speaking into the microphone?
Where it's exposed concrete now, while it was raining, there was just small little water likes to find the easiest course down the hill, and it was starting to just form little channels, because that's the softest spot right now, is that 3/4 minus. Even though it's been compacted, it's still softer than the native or the asphalt. So it's just starting, as long as we get our typical rain events, I don't, because the gravel is all compacted, so it should stay in place. If we get another, 1.5 inch rainstorm in 24 hours, we could have some of that washed out. But for now, I was checking on it. I went out there a couple times today just to see how it was holding up in the rain, and it was.
Well, what I'm getting at is we're not the people who come up with an alternative plan. We would approve an alternative plan that's presented to us, and if we gave you time to present an alternative design to us, what would be the cost and the liability associated with that in the context of the current project?
So, short of trying to tool or stamp something in a curb, we can look into that fairly short order. The other option would be a berm, and that's
an
not,
asphalt berm.
That's an asphalt berm. That's another option. If we're talking something more significant, like a seating wall, similar to what's on Hedges Street, that's a fair amount of design work. Obviously, there's going to be a foundation under that. There's some tree removal that would have to go into that. Any kind of foundation wall that you put in there, whether it's a seating wall or not, just to get it to stand and keep from falling over, we're probably looking at a 30 to 36 inch footing and a 20 to 24 inch wall. So, that would be a significant wall. And that's not to say that that's the only option, but I'm just giving you a range of options. And I think the cost on those hand-stacked walls is, we've done some repair work up on the promenade and the walk. And, that's craftsmanship that warrants some. I know at my previous employer, we were looking at seating walls, and they were somewhere in that $200 to $250 a foot range when you can include the footing and all the handwork. So, that wall that they have on Hedges is a valuable piece of work, and it's a beautiful piece of work. Don't get me wrong. But if that's what we're talking about, if those are the kind of options, then, I think anything that you put that's more significant in height, you got to all of a sudden talk about a foundation. And the foundation should be below grade. I'm guessing that I'm not even sure how, if you're talking historic significance, why would adding a feature that wasn't
False
there, how does that
historic
meet the threshold of
Right.
historic significance? So it seems
would
to me
only
like
be-
hiding it is the area that we're trying to get to.
It would be an attempt to replicate what might have been done had somebody in 1914 anticipated the New Year's Day flash flood.
Right.
I think the idea of hiding it is probably more appropriate.
Probably.
Rather than trying to recreate something that was never there.
group, if I can comment real quickly.
Excuse me, were you going to
Yeah,
comment
if
to
I-
us?
If I could comment for a
Oh,
second.
you may, oh, sure.
In looking at the appropriateness, there's always kind of two options to go down, and I think you're alluding to it, but I just wanted to identify as either make something compatible in design, kind of more historically appropriate, or you'd make it so it visually goes away. And you know, the coloring the concrete, that kind of approach is the visually going away, and the seating wall is kind of making the historically appropriate addition. And one thing I did want to ask to Mr. Lewis is there anything underground? I mean, money not an issue right now in this discussion. Is there any underground option of an infiltration pipe or something like that, if as even an option? Are we just looking at really above ground because we have the topography in that kind of gully area where you still have to create kind of a barrier in order for the water? Or is there anything underground that would be an option rather than above ground?
Well, I mean, Paul mentioned some what's called controlled density fill. It's a concrete slurry mix where you could cut the roadway out, or well, it's already cut, remove the forms, dig down, and fill that trench up with CDF, controlled density fill. We probably, you know, we definitely have to reestablish through plantings something that would armor that bank a little bit from erosion. You know, typically we don't put CDF over water lines. That's you know, usually a water line is, and I think this one's about 3 feet deep. Typically CDF is used when things are very, very shallow, or if you're in a road crossing where, you know, lots of times we don't have the ability to do a good job of watching the compaction of that trench. So we will add controlled density fill to the trench, and you know, some jurisdictions require it for all street crossings. This runs parallel with the street, so it's not a place where our standard would typically require for controlled density fill. But you know, I suppose that's an option to kind of help. But even that, I mean, you get enough water in there, it's likely to find a path between the controlled density fill and the native soil. So I don't think there's and putting a pipe under there, I mean, we're trying to pick up surface water.
Mm-hmm.
Is what we're really trying to do.
I'm just making sure all the options are
Right.
on the table.
I was just thinking, first, what's the distance of the curb that you've got in right now, the length?
It's on that page. That's that other second page that I gave you.
Yeah. What's the scale?
Does it say on there?
97.
90 linear feet.
120, maybe?
No,
90 plus 45,
90 plus
90,
45.
35,
Yeah, 135 feet.
135 feet?
Well, no, that gets you to the mountable, and then there's another 35, so 170 feet.
Yeah. This might sound silly, but, you know, oftentimes you'll see in front of a garage, there'll be a
Trench drain.
trench drain. That's pieced together, set in concrete, that takes that water to keep it going into the garage. Could something like that happen here on a little bigger scale, where you might have a trench drain that's bigger to carry that water, still have that asphalt berm, but this is a trench that has removable grates that I guess would have to require maintenance, but, yeah, I know. Curbs are no problem. That's a thought.
That's a feasible thought.
It's
But
just-
you need to control the flow of the water beyond that, I think, is probably.
Well, you're talking a long, kind of a ribbon drain that runs all the way down, that would run all the way to this catch basin.
right to the catch basin. It's catching water coming down the road, is catching it off the road, but it's taking it at a level to the ground, or to the asphalt. Still have that berm. If it does wash, it's going to come back, but in essence, taking that curb and bringing it to that catch all the way down. And the grate, you know, I'm sure I've done them on garages. I'm sure there's a commercial grate that might be 8 inches, 10 inches
Yeah.
bigger with a deeper well that you're inverting it, I guess. And that would alleviate the situation of here's this thing sticking out. You can still do the asphalt. Problem solved, but I don't know if that is a problem solved. It's an option.
I don't want to discount it. It's an option. It's not, for us, there's
I know
a
your
there's
side
a
of it.
fair amount of effort that goes into building that kind of
Oh, yeah.
structure. And then, so it basically takes out what we have,
Yep.
and in terms of formwork, and trenching down and building something deep enough to handle that. Those are typically set in concrete. They can be set
right.
such that you would pave up to them.
Right.
And then you need something on the backside of that to keep that,
The asphalt burn.
water from running, especially if there's a point load as it comes down Ganong. It is that, it is an option. The other little thing that I don't care for too much about that option is that there's a lot of trees, deciduous
Debris.
trees. So those are susceptible to debris because it's usually a 2 to, even the industrial
yeah.
ones are about 2 inches wide.
Yeah, and that's,
So as the
know that's
operations or the maintenance manager for that, I'm not really excited about that
Yeah.
option. But it is an alternative that we could look at. And
It's also a very costly alternative, I think.
it's going to be another costly alternative.
anything beyond what you're doing now is costly, if you've already got things set up. It's,
Yeah, I mean, we can pull out we can pull out what we have there and add in an asphalt berm, but we're going to still pay for that curb because they've gone through most of the work.
Right.
They may get a little credit for that, but we'll probably lose that in building an asphalt berm.
I don't think that's an option.
But, I mean, I don't want to sound like the naysayer here. I'm just trying to answer
No, I
honestly about some of those.
See your side of it
options.
as well as the other side.
Well, and if it's a maintenance issue down the road, that's
That's an issue, too.
That's not solving the problem.
And a simple asphalt berm doesn't solve the problem.
No. That's a two-year solution. Well, would someone like to make a
We
motion?
we
or
seem
do
to
we
be
need
moving
discuss
toward a
this?
consensus here.
I don't know if there's good options.
I'm not typically overjoyed by compromises, and I think that what we will do here is a compromise in the interest of practicality, but secure in the knowledge that moss and time will make a curb become a natural feature. I think the colored concrete alternative is probably the best way to, as Christina said, conceal it. And I will move that we approve that option.
Somebody like to second that? Call the roll.
Okay. Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Ms. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Basinger?
Aye.
Mr. Eisland?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I guess procedurally, it would have been nice if this would have come before us sooner, rather than through a complaint process.
Right.
But, I think that this is a good compromise.
I hear that. I have a whole new understanding of historic significance, and I think John does too, in the Kenema neighborhood especially. I mean,
Well, you guys have come before this board many times, so.
we definitely think highly of the Kenema neighborhood, so I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that it's perceived negatively.
Right.
Because we've put a lot of time and investment, and the city has, not
definitely.
we individually, but we have individually done a lot to keep Kenema as historic as possible.
Well, thank you very much.
Let me comment on the January 1st response by the Public Works Department. We put in a call, and within 3 minutes, your trucks were there. 3 minutes.
That's good to
And
hear.
when the water was coming across 99, flash flood was on. It was 9:30 at night on New Year's Day, and we were down there with our cell phone, didn't know who to call. And
Yeah.
the-
Well, Paul will attest, that's one of the scariest storms I've, in terms of property damage. Looking at that area that you were talking about in specifics, it was pretty awesome. And then
Oh.
just right at this corner house where that stream goes under the creek, you could hear the large, massive boulders just, kind of coming, crushing and washing down the creek.
you
So it
you
was
do have the thanks of the residents down in that neighborhood,
Appreciate
for
it.
sure.
If I could add one, it's, I went out on my porch, and when I saw John, it sounded like a railroad
washed away in this event. So, just to give some idea of what it was, I do believe, though, that some of this is the appropriateness is like when we get into vinyl windows. Some of this stuff is akin to the same logic that we use why we don't have vinyl windows in historic districts like this. And we're skidding on some stuff.
I think this is a good compromise. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is preservation grant extension request.
Yeah, Preservation Grant PG 0805 was approved last October for the people that were on the board last fall. Kathy Lakey was the one that was rehanging all of her window sashes. And unfortunately, she really wanted to be in the house while it was happening. And the only time that she had available was during the snow week. And so her contractor was canceled. And she can't do it until June. And so that's past the deadline date. And being a new grant, of course, we're going to come up with these policies of how do we want to deal with legitimate extension requests. And I think she has a legitimate extension request. We still have money left in the grant program. So, if I made her reapply for the grant again, she'd be able to get it. So one thing is to come up, we don't have to do it tonight, but maybe at our next work session to really come up with our policy of when will we grant extensions, how do we want to grant extensions, and when do we want to make people come back and apply. With this grant program, we have 3 different pools of money with 3 different grant deadline time periods. This May is the Metro Enhancement Grant time period. That's the $10,000. We have $7,000 from the State Historic Preservation Office through the CLG grant program, and that's September 30th. And then we have the Community Development Department's $10,000. So in this situation, we're fine because we've given out $10,000 worth of grant money, and so between now and May, we've gotten our Metro Enhancement grant. So, if she came in June, we could still use other grant money. So it's not like it's a use it or lose it if she comes back in June. So on a staff level, I'm supportive of granting her this grant request till June or to give her another X days. We haven't created a process to do that yet. So I wanted to just get input from the board and find out if we can get this approved tonight.
Are we allowed to approve this one and come up with a process after
Yeah.
the fact?
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
This isn't a quasi-judicial land use process. This is a grant program. So,
Yeah. I think for now, since it's never come before us again, or previously, treat it on a case-by-case basis would be my thought, but in the future, we should have a policy. And then we can discuss that at a future work session.
Well, I would certainly say that the storm conditions in December were beyond
Anyone's
the recipient's
expectations.
control here. I would move that we grant the extension requested till June 30th, through June?
can we do like July something? Just
Okay, give her some slack.
give her some slack just in case.
July 15th.
Great.
I move we extend the deadline on that project to July 15th, 2009.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Yates?
Are you taking?
Oh, I'm sorry. Call the vote. Sorry. Yeah.
Aye. Yes.
Mr. Eisen,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Mr. Basinger.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, I'll let her know.
Okay, public hearing is now closed, and we're turning to a work session. Does that mean we can turn our microphones off, or?
Do we-
I'd like to talk a little bit, if I could, take off, just on a potential grant that we're working on.
Can we limit it to 5 minutes, Paul?
Yes. Right. We have on Third Avenue a very junky house. We've approached the owner. I've talked with Christina about it. It is one that it had some real, the siding on the house, on half of the house is 3-tab coming down. We would like to re-side the whole house. We're working with the owner, we're working with a contractor. We would like to do it as a community project. The person is on disability. They have limited assets. It is ugly as hell. And we are trying to do everything we can to pull the pieces together as a neighborhood and a neighborhood association and neighbors who care to do this project that in effect will rectify something that might not otherwise get fixed. And everybody seems to have a consensus that if there was ever a place where grant money should be used and where we should be doing it, this is it.
Are you talking about using preservation grant money? What grant is?
It's kind of like we will go to Christina and to you guys, whatever fits the best way we can,
Okay.
and whatever we can do. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
where it is, but what we want to do is
Yeah.
take advantage of
April.
one of the opportunities, and we want to match it with neighborhood labor. We want to try to get all the siding for it at wholesale or cost. We're going to try to do everything we can to make it fit. But the most important thing is to put the lights out on this, something that's a problem that might not otherwise get resolved. And we just believe that this is an opportunity, and most everyone seems to have 100% agree. I haven't found anyone that disagrees.
There's, I do just comment so you hear, the board can hear. This grant program actually doesn't take in-kind labor, so if you wanted to use the April matching grant competitive, which siding is a perfect example, you're going to have to probably do another grant program to get the money, and then you can use that money for this grant program for the matching grant. But the way it's written, it doesn't. We can't take in kind.
One of the things.
Have you done anything about getting costs on that yet?
Yes, we are working on trying to get that done with the one contractor that's in the neighborhood that would agree that he would try to help and do this. The other thing is if we did this, we might want to swap out the vinyl windows that you guys approved and get them so that the front image, the front projection of the house, once we finished it, didn't have vinyl windows in it. So those could maybe be part.
Both of those.
Those could be part of this deal where we do those in the window things and replace those with appropriate wood, and then we use the second phase going for the matching grant for the siding. But this is kind of like thinking out loud. You know, that's all I'm asking is people for us all to think out loud and collaborate. How do we do it? How do we do what everyone would think would be the best way we could apply our assets, labor, and resources into correcting something that is it really detracts.
This structure is a contributing structure?
It's a contributing structure.
And
By
if
the
I remember right, it's
Nicholas
about a 1940s vintage.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big issue, I think, Paul, is if you can find money from donations or from another grant, you can leverage that for this grant program. But we can't, this is specifically a non-in-kind grant program.
But maybe we can use this for the windows thing, part of it. But what we're trying to do is just be smart. Do what is the best.
You might check with community development through the county. They have some low-interest loans and also grant programs.
I think that is no longer there, but you can try.
You might try.
Yeah.
I'll try anything. You know,
Yeah.
this is to in a better mentality, just for our neighborhood, for our district.
And Paul, I can the grant applications online on the planning page for the preservation grants. If you just go to the planning page on the right-hand side, you'll see the whole packet. You can download it, and I can meet with you privately. But the big thing is just finding the matching money. So, but
Okay.
yeah, I think both of those
we're-
projects are perfect.
I just wanted you
examples.
guys to be aware that we're trying to pull something together that, of significance that we think is important and that we have buy-in on.
Good. Exactly. We'll have a brief recess here.
Take it, okay.
While we're in recess, we can, has there been any discussion about the antique sale? We didn't do it last year. Is it? We should do it again. I don't know. I mean, when, that's been our money, our fundraiser in the past, and we did spend quite a bit on the picnic last year. And we didn't talk at all about how to restore our treasury. We still have somewhere $2,500 in the account now, which I don't know. It would be a first for us to spend it on a specific
No, I'm not looking
home.
for any money
that-
from that account.
No, I'm trying to think though of the kind of neighborhood fundraiser that could come up with the money to qualify for the matching grant, and I think
I'll put my legs and try to do stuff. Point me in the right direction, I will do it. I just think this is such a really positive,
Well,
very positive.
there are lots of foundations. The Windermere Foundation, a real estate company, gets involved in neighborhood projects, and we do a community service project every year. And but you know, but Mike. Michael is just a guy in need. We were talking to him, it's been 3 years ago now, and he didn't think that he could afford to live anywhere else. He thought if he couldn't live in that house, he didn't have money to pay rent in any other place.
Joey, the contractor, said that he was wondering if his initial thesis, this is so rough.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't want to do anything in that house.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, a little nervous about chasing his tail.
Yeah.
And, you know what that
What kind of siding is he proposing? Or are you
we're
thinking?
looking at something that we could do simple, maybe like that, lap cedar siding, you know, the figure joint. Yeah, if we can buy it cheap, I could buy it directly from the wholesaler, at cost, through Dale. Dale will do that from Dale window.
I think this is the kind of project that you could probably get some enthusiasm down in the neighborhood.
I think neighborhoods all in favor. Everybody's in favor.
Excited about it?
Yes. Yeah, but, you know, for him to be as bad off as he is, I think, you know, he's someone to cry and look at. You know, like anybody that can live like that.
Are you familiar with the Mink family history?
Yes.
They've been around forever. They used to own the entire area on the West Limb side of the river where the settling ponds are now. That all used to be their property from almost to the Tualatin River, clear down to Michael's mother is still around. I don't remember where she is. He had a brother who ran tugboats on the Willamette forever. He died about 4 years ago.
And then my wife's family are taking them. So there is a reasonable amount that goes back. So we have
He is a rustic person.
rusting.
Okay.
Any questions? Oh, I know. How frequent is you?
Did, now, I never,
So, okay, so this is.
I never got the second application. I have only Denise. I have Denise. I didn't, no, I don't have Cindy's.
Well, I'll trust you.
Is Denise is the second one that came?
Oh. And he's only what, $400 an hour?
Oh, we'll share.
I didn't bring it with me. I didn't think.
Okay.
One at a time.
And you've seen, well, we know Denise, yes. Okay. Okay.
I'm getting a little old. Well, I was looking at 2
All right.
You get number 2, John?
Welcome
Thank you for applying.
to the Oregon City Inquisition.
We have just a short list of standard questions we've been asking applicants for whatever. So we'll let Vicki start with the first question.
Well, there's several reasons. I was asked a couple of years ago to do it by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and at the time I had too many irons in the fire, and I just couldn't see my way to do it. And this year I was asked again by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association to do it, and I wanted to help out. And I know between the last time I was asked and this time that I was asked, I was doing the minutes for the meeting in another capacity. I was, working as a temp, and I really got saw how interesting it was and how kind of it was really, helpful to the community. And I mean, I myself got a lot of. My husband and I are fixing up our old house, and we got a lot of good out of coming to the HRB. I think the HRB is very beneficial to people like us who like to be our own contractors and can't really afford not to be our own contractors, but we get a lot of help from agencies like this and committees like this, and I think that it's very beneficial to the community.
What's your background in this work?
Well, I guess my house. We've been working on our house and have been our own contractors since 1992. We moved here in January of '92, and it's a 1916. The was just totally dilapidated when we moved in. I just stood on the front porch and said, "This is it." And he said, "Well, you better come in and look at the inside." And I said, "I don't care what it looks like on the inside. I like it out here." And so from then on, it was, dive in, and each project we did, we had to research how to do it. We got involved with the Old Home Forum when we first moved here, because the Old Home Forum was the only agency we knew that we could pick people's brains and ask them, what we should do to make it historically significant. And also, we got the house on the Historic Review Board by going through the HRB and researching it and finding out who owned it before we did, and because we didn't want to put all kinds of sweat equity into this place and make it look nice and have somebody come and tear it down because it wasn't on the Historic Review Board. So that was one of the first things we did. And
It's on the city register now.
it is, yeah, not the national. So each project that we undertook with the house, we made sure that and that came to building our garage. That was the last project we did. We built our garage. We made sure that it was, went by the HRB, and we were our own contractors, and my husband learned how to plumb, he learned how to do electrical, we learned how to drywall, and Todd was very helpful to us one time when we had to put in a steel beam in our basement, and we had to get calcs, and we were running into all kinds of really expensive engineers, and he gave us the name of somebody, and they, he charged us half of what we were, going to pay for it. And it was so neat to have somebody in town that, that we could go to and ask for this kind of, it's neat to have this as a resource. I just think that more people need to know about it.
Okay, my question's the longer one. What appointed boards have you served on previously, and what was the most rewarding and most frustrating part of that experience?
You talking about city boards? Or
any appointed boards. I see on your resume you've got a couple of appointed boards you
Yeah,
served
well,
on.
they were. I guess the most frustrating was the church boards, because you have a concept of how things should be, and then your fellow church members have a concept, and you can hardly believe they've got that concept if they're the same religion you are. It's kind of like, how come you're thinking like that? So I guess the church board was the last one. I mean, that's what the one I just got off of was the major board of my church. It was board of directors of the church. I was on another board that was a lecture board, but this was a major church board, and there was 5 of us, and was on it for 2 years. And at the first, it was kind of a little rocky, and then at the end, we were all really good friends, and we were all on the same page. And I think it works that way. You start getting, your thinking kind of goes in line. You have to kind of all mesh. So that was the most challenging, but it was the most harmonious at the end.
Well, you got to witness firsthand, what would we call it, a glitch in the historic review process. What do you see is the most needed improvement in the city's preservation program?
Well, I would think that if it's a program, that there should be protocol, and that and the protocol should have, certain things that you check off. If you need to come to HRB before certain procedures begin, that should be checked off, and it should be done, in the sequence that is the most advantageous.
And as you know, I'm sure from dealing with your own project, you go to the planning desk and you get that protocol laid down.
Absolutely. It's clear as a bell. I mean, there's not anything that, you know, that's complicated about it. It's just, you know, when the inspector comes and he doesn't pass you, that's when it starts getting bad.
Never happened to you, like that?
Yeah. Well, the second part of the question is a what-if question. Would your answer change if budget constraints were included in your analysis?
Well, I don't know that it costs that much money to just run it by a board, does it?
We're volunteers.
That's right. And I mean, you
Or
have to
somewhere.
meet anyway on Tuesdays or however many times a month you meet. You know, that cost should not be a factor, I don't think. As far, I mean, if just for approval, you know, if it means the approval costs the project more money, then if that's what you're talking about, then
Well,
I think maybe those parameters.
I hate to use our Kanema curb as an example, but it was hinted that some of the alternatives
Would be-
to that would
Right,
put a considerable cost burden on the city.
right, but that was because they already did stuff that they have to undo. And that
Well,
was,
no,
that-
the alternative, the natural rock wall that he was talking about at $250 a foot.
Oh,
Uh,
had they done that before they dug the culvert and did all that, then,
well, all of that.
That's a tough example.
If funding were not an issue, it says was, and that's not correct. It should be were. It's a subjunctive.
you're an English major, aren't you?
No, advertising major.
Oh,
We deal in a lot of cases where we would like to see a homeowner or an applicant do more, be more grandiose, spend more money.
You mean in their efforts to make their properties more historically
Mhm,
correct
mhm.
when they do projects?
Or when they
Yeah,
come in with the
well-
vinyl windows. And
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that's actually a fairly good example because the real wood windows cost a lot more than those vinyl
Yes,
ones.
they do.
And we're insisting that the homeowners spend that money in the interest of preserving the historic integrity.
Yep. My feeling is that maybe when the real estate agent sells them the house that they're going to fix up, and that it could be like, you know, introduced at that time, you know, the city doesn't allow you to cut corners when it comes to
Yeah.
renovation.
Yeah, well, the law requires that real estate brokers reveal that information prior to the purchase. It often doesn't happen, but the law requires that it happens.
Right.
Those darn real estate agents.
Right. Well, and I mean, it could be part of also when the title or something, that they have to record some stuff, or, I don't know.
So the close on that question is: Are you ready to step into that bear trap?
Oh,
and,
you mean
and
about
deal with that with
Yeah.
the general public, because that's often what is the optimum option for historic preservation is outside the financial reality of the
Exactly.
applicant.
Well, I'll tell you, I have lived the financial reality. I am what you would call the general public, because
Good.
we lived in our house when we were renovating it. We put up, wet sheets between doorways so that when we sanded the drywall, all the powder wouldn't go into the other room, and we kept the baby upstairs while we did all this banging around, and we couldn't let him crawl around on the floor. He had to have one of those Johnny jumpers because he couldn't crawl around on the floor because he'd get all his nails in his knees. And So we lived that, and what we did was one room at a time, one window at a time. We're still working on the house, but we love it. We like doing it. It's my husband's and I. It's for the longest time that was our recreation, was working on the house. So we didn't take vacations. We had the baby. We didn't. That he was our entertainment, and then the house was our recreation. So I empathize with people that say they don't have the money and that they want to get it all done right away and all that. But my husband, he took out each and every double hung window, and he added wood to the side of it, and he put in chains instead of ropes on the double hungs, and he put in, made sure they didn't ravel anymore, and he re-glued the old glass back in, and he took his time, and he did like 15 windows just like that in our house. So I know how it is, and I know it can be done. It's not always the most, fun way, but it's the economic way.
Anyone have any other questions? Do you have any questions from us, Cindy?
No, I don't think so. I told Christina when I applied, that my short time doing minutes for the HRB was, I kind of got the whole gist of how it runs and how it is, and I really liked it. So I'm ready to serve.
Well, thank you.
With me.
We're always looking for warm bodies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that your sweater there? Oh.
Now, she said the neighborhood association asked her if she would do this. They're both from the neighborhood association.
So she's on the staff, and she didn't really speak to that.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Not like you haven't ever been here before.
Not lately. Fortunately, I've caught what everybody else caught, or some version of it in the last 2 months, and yeah, that's my new mantra now.
Oh, you don't have to share.
It's not catching, unfortunately, so you don't have to worry about it.
Good.
Well, I'm beyond that phase into the sinus infection phase, and antibiotics are starting to kick in.
Been there. On round 2, unfortunately.
Oh, I don't want to go there. Well, why don't you start again, Vicki?
I've got the first one, and my basic question is, why are you applying for a position on this property?
Well, the primary reason is that there is a vacancy, and I have been aware for some time that Rick needed to vacate his position, and although he's now moved on to bigger and better things, as you very well know, he's got quite a job as the president of the Association of Oregon Recyclers. So I know what that involves because my husband was there a few years back. And I think that it's very important that we have a full board, particularly due to the fact that the city has once again have grants and programs for people to apply for. And I think it's even more important to have a representative from the neighborhood, because I think the McLaughlin neighborhood is probably where the majority of the grants are coming from. So these are, for me, and those of you that live in McLaughlin, these are our neighbors and our friends and acquaintances.
I know the answer to all these questions for you.
Okay, well, John.
But we
if you
have a
wanna-
standard list we got to go
If you
through.
want to just take over, that'd be just fine. I could rest my voice.
Oh, I know you well enough. What's your background in historic preservation?
Well, should I start out with what is not my favorite?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, 2-second answer. Well, I would say that I have probably done were working on their house, and I think I was too stupid at the time to not say, hey, if you ever need any help, why don't you call me? And they did. And that, I think, in essence, is where I really caught the fever, stripping banisters, and, that's before they had a lot of the more modern tools that we have now and things that you can use. We were doing it by hand, and that was quite interesting. But I think it's been my passion my whole life. And even when I didn't know that it was my passion, it's been my passion. My elderly aunt in Los Angeles is downsizing, and she has this pile of stuff for me. And she said, well, ever since you were a little girl, you've always been interested in old things, even though you call it preservation now. And I didn't know that. She's been regaling me with stories. So I have to say it's probably been my whole life.
Okay, I'll get the next one. Have you previously served on an appointed board? And what was the most rewarding and the most frustrating part of those experiences?
Well, I would have to say that the Citizen Involvement Advisory Committee that I was appointed to back in the 80s was more of an eye-opener than I anticipated. And the reason that it was very rewarding is that we were able to travel all over the state talking to people about Goal 1. And I made a lot of friends of people that, some of them, of course, they're deceased now, but one of the members was from Brookings, another member was from Cove, places I hadn't been yet and have since been. And I think in talking to people about their opportunity to participate in the process of determining their land use plans or their county plans was very rewarding. What I found very frustrating was that on the other side, having some local governments basically try to box that and not give people all the information about how they could participate, but just tell them just enough so that it was discouraging. And we had to report our findings back to the Land Conservation and Development Commission, and I think it was eye-opening for some of them as well. And this is well after the time that the board was going around the state talking to people in towns about what they wanted. But I think that was fairly rewarding. I think the other one that was rewarding is actually when I was serving on the County Landmarks Commission with both of you, because again, people on that board I am still friends with, and we still talk. And I just saw, what was the woman's name that lived in Damascus? I just talked to her.
The Circus Society.
Yes, I just saw her not too long. Remember her? I can't think of her name right off the top of my head, but I just saw her recently. Gloria Boyer.
Gloria Boyer.
Yes. So it was just very, very, very fun, and I think we had a lot of successes. I didn't find it frustrating, but I think what we did as a group is we really put our heads together. We came up with solutions for people that were reasonable and not onerous. I think the only group we were really kind of hard on was the county themselves, because
that's why some of us were no longer on the board after that.
Yeah, they
Liberty Building, yes.
well, no, this was the barn on Sunnyside Road.
I was gone then.
Yeah, okay, you were gone then, but yeah, I heard from Lynn that we probably admonished them a little too much, and we said, well, the reason that we did that is because we felt that they needed to kind of go a little bit beyond the call of duty to resolve the problem. And we actually found a great solution. I've actually seen the barn actually reconstructed, and so it's a win-win. But it was a lot of row to hoe to get there.
When I started seeing that in the paper, that's when I was getting nervous for dealing with it.
Yeah. Well, you should know that they are proposing to tear down a building on Stafford Road. I was reliving that.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, they tore it down.
Yeah.
That was unfortunate.
It's just funny. I would think maybe it's more of your frustration on the board.
Well, it leads nicely into my question.
We did. It was very, very enjoyable.
What do you see as the most needed improvement to the
the city's preservation program?
Education, education, education. As some of you know, I'm a huge proponent of trying to bring back the old house workshops. We used to do those on a fairly regular basis prior to my tenure, and they kind of ceased to exist after my tenure, and I still have people asking, are we ever going to have any of those? And so it'd be something that I would like to see the board work on with staff to try to have those. There are so many resources out there, even more so when we were doing them, that it would be great to have people come in, make it really fun, make it worth their while to come out on a Saturday to learn more, because I think the more people learn, the more the light comes on and they go, oh, I get it. And then you understand, you start to have a beginning of understanding of why preservation is important, why we want people to come here and see the real Oregon City and not the reconstructed Oregon City. And again, on going back to the February 14th, we had a number of people here in this who lived in this community that, believe it or not, felt that an admission fee was an impediment. They had never gone to any of these places before, and they're right here. And it's very typical that you live in a town and you don't go to the stuff that's in your own town. So one of the things I know that we're talking about at the Guapo House on the Rose Farm is that we do this on a yearly basis, not just for the 150th, but maybe on Oregon's birthday every year we do, a free open day. Again, while I was doing tours that day, I had an opportunity to talk to people about Oregon history. And I was amazed at how, not really, outwardly amazed, but I was inwardly amazed about how few people knew about, okay, they knew it was Oregon's birthday, but that they know kind of how we got there to Oregon's birthday. And those are the things that start building those foundations and building the pride and the desire to know more. Because once we started talking about it, they said, oh, well, I can find out more information. I said, yes, I did. And I referred them to several books, or I said, Clackamas History Centers have some really good resources, and, the Oregon City Library has these. So education, I think, is one of the most important things. And even though we're going to have to do it over and over and over again, because there's always new people, you can never stop that process.
I think she answered all three parts of your question.
I don't even have to ask the rest.
Did I answer all of your questions, or do you have another part you want me to take?
Well, the other part was, would your answer change if budget constraints were included in your analysis?
Well, I think to do an old house workshop, there would probably need to be a little bit of funding, but I think for the most part that it could be, we could look for partners, particularly the neighborhood associations could partner in, and although they're not wealthy, there is a little bit of funding that could come from that. Plus you have all that in-kind labor, and I would say between Christine and me and you, all of you, I know there are people that we could get to come to Oregon City, for maybe as little as, hey, how about a free lunch? That we take them to lunch.
And we do have
to come,
CLG funding.
Yeah, and to come, and that's how we funded it before, was through CLG. But to get to talk about these things that, why are, as my friend Jane Morrison likes to say, why are the windows of a house like, the windows of your soul? Why is that important? Why are windows one of the most important things? And obviously you guys know, because the grant is geared towards windows. Why is it important to look at, look at the siding? Why is routine and ordinary maintenance important? It seems obvious, but it may not be so obvious to people. So just sort of being able to, I look at it as sort of giving back, because I think about all the people that I bugged all the time. I was starting out and asking these kind of questions, and now you have the opportunity to give some of that information. And give you a quick example. I was at a building in Northwest Portland this morning talking to the owner about something they want to do, and they were telling me about how they went through and redid their floors. And she said, but I haven't figured out how to really clean them, and I don't want my cleaning people to use Murphy's oil soap or whatever she was talking about. And I said, well, hey, you know what? I have a really good tip. A guy that does floor refinishing told me to use X. And she says, what a great idea. And I walked away from there feeling like, thank you, Charlie. You know, somebody told me something and I passed it on, and she said, that was great. And it's something very simple. So it's just an opportunity to sort of do that. So I think we could do it without a lot of money, even very little money.
We can't even afford name tags for everyone.
Well, like I said, I'd be happy to take them home and do block print for you. You know, I'm working on my handwriting certificate right now.
That might mean they just have to test it still, maybe we're not quite totally perfect.
Could be.
Maybe they're gonna switch them up and you'll be somebody else with them.
Well, I heard from her after I got appointed. I volunteered for a 6-month stint, and she signed me up for 3 years.
For her, technically, I guess.
Well, you can all be coerced, you know, machine has very powerful pauses and phrases like persuasion.
Alice is too.
Any other questions?
I think that's it. Do you have any questions from us, Denise?
Well, I know you're gonna be working on your goals, so, what do you all see as sort of the number one priority, or a number one priority?
How do you say education, when they're asking me that question? I think the biggest thing is educating the public, who live in the neighborhood. That's my frustration.
Public involvement.
I think, yeah, I think public involvement and educating people. And, you know, we don't like to do it through code enforcement. Unfortunately, it's how a lot of people have ended up here in the last couple of years. And we'd like to not have that as a recurring thing.
Education and instilling desire.
Well, it would be,
And then we also have to
another
educate the
idea
city.
might be to, you know, there's lots of articles already out there written, so it's not like you're reinventing the wheel, but maybe there could be a preservation corner in the Trail News, that there could be some, you know, couple of paragraphs, you know, in order to, have you thought about this, to learn more, go here. I mean, I do read it, you know, myself, I kind of scan it and look, kind of see what's interesting, and, you know, those sort of things, and everybody gets one. Now, again, you can't make them read it, but it's another avenue for
Or e-
disseminating information.
Even a link to the website would be good, because Christina's, I mean, you've got a great website.
But again, we have to also look at the population in the neighborhoods, that as much as I like to believe that people are all online, they are not. And we need to look at multiple modes of communication, and people like to have something in their hand because it's portable and you can take it somewhere else. Although you can do that with your computer, but I know I now have a laptop, and to be honest with you, I don't drag it very many places with me. For one thing, I'm afraid I'll forget it somewhere until, you know, put it down and forget that I had it with me. But we need to think about, you know, multiple modes, or maybe think about even a simple pamphlet that could easily be updated, which we can do easier now because we have desktop publishing. So it's not like you publish 100 of them and they're instantly outdated. You can trade it around. And I think it's one of the things we've been talking about, and I want to talk to Rob more about on the Main Street group, is that we're doing design, but again, how do we translate design guidelines that we want to propose to something that makes sense to people? Because we all know what it kind of means, but again, we have to drill down to make it appropriate for the Joe Schmo that has a good idea but might not know what the right direction to go in is. And again, you know, I feel like I'm probably doing a deja vu, because I remember at one time with someone else here at City walking and talking to every single one of those business owners on Main Street. And there are many different ones now, but talking to them about why preservation was important, why their building was important, and what its significance was to the founding of Oregon City, and why that's important. And you kind of either get, yeah, that's kind of interesting, or what are you talking about? You know, it's just a building. And so one of our biggest naysayers became one of our biggest supporters, but that took time as he got more educated. So we definitely need to use him, because we should shove him out there and say, see what he did. It's Herb Arbor.
Yeah, I figured it was.
Yeah, nice, very nice. So I guess I I guess we're all in agreement that that's what needs to happen, and we need to continue, because we definitely had some dark years here at the city where there was just nothing. It just went away, and
Well, Christina's brought it back.
yes,
We're
well, she
very
has.
fortunate.
Yes. I knew about those dark days. You talk to people, and there's two houses on Seventh that I go up, and I know, why they are the way they are, because the staff told me it wasn't historic. So we're, I guess we're agreeing. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you
And,
for coming in. And
Next time, John, I'll just give you a permanent proxy, you could be a spokesperson.
I have one other question for you, and this is, you have a lot of other boards and committees you serve on. Is this going to be a problem? To have one more iron in the fire?
Well, I'm already reading all the packets and stuff you come in.
I know you do.
So it's not like it's anything in addition.
Okay.
There actually are a couple of things that I just told one of the governance committee chairman who's looking for renominations, and I said, you can nominate me for another 3-year term. However, I reserve the right to leave early. And he said, okay, he would take that. So I will not, on this particular board, I will not be serving a full 3-year term. He knows that. But we're trying to do, I'm trying to help him recruit someone. And it's much easier if I'm recruiting from inside the board as opposed to not on. I would. Well, I would need to turn over anything involving the historic review board, but not the planning commission. No, but I'm gonna, there's somebody else that I have had in mind for quite some time, and I have not been persuasive enough at this point, so I need to talk to him. He knows it inside and out better than I just have to. I've got to find some leverage. That's how I will describe that.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you, because I will need it, but I'm working on his wife right now.
Okay.
I'm gonna go that route, and I'm gonna put the moves on it. He has offered to help. He just doesn't, I have a document too, so he knows. Well, we all do it with a little bit of love and a little bit of concern, and try not to be alarmist. Anyway, well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go home and find out what there is for dinner.
I'd like to do that soon, too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Denise.
Well, actually, I'm also going to try to go online and listen to the rest of Obama's speech. I heard parts of it.
Me too. And then I fell asleep.
Well, that's
You should have been eating.
I know, I should have been. My son came in and said, Dad, don't you have a meeting in 5 minutes?
all you need is your rest. Cat naps are good. So I will see you all soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Do you want these back?
I drew on mine.
You can recycle.
Okay.
I've turned down mine.
When was Denise on the committee before? It was before my time.
She was on the Packers County Lakers.
Ah,
And she was staff person here at the city
Yeah.
of Morganton.
I knew that.
She left 4, 3, yeah, something like that.
I don't know when it She was, yeah, a staff person when we bought our first two houses in Rockland, and she would actually come to the door with the inventory form and say, "Welcome to the neighborhood." It was a little above and beyond what staff would typically do. After that, my dog ran through the house.
This is just, I think that involvement with her on board, also.
I actually been involved with it and other
Other things.
PDC.
I know.
That was her for 7 years before.
I think I was only on that one for a year, when they picked me up, it was the whole different team.
More on her than that. Is this something we talk about now, like decide?
Well, I think we should probably
Yeah,
try to decide.
Resolve it?
I mean, it's a public meeting right now, trying to, sound off. Yeah, if someone wanted to pop in, they can sit here. No, no, so.
I think we can have like discussions. And, hey, Denise is very qualified. She can do great some things. She, I know, has alienated some people from time to time. You were on the board with her more.
I was on the board with her and I served being the chairman. I was, for the 3 years I was, I dealt with Denise for 7 years. And she knows a lot. She has good connections. She's very experienced. I would kind of agree with that. And also, I think I've always been, I said this when you guys interviewed me, is I like to be efficient and intense. Denise is really smart. She knows her stuff, but it tends to drag instead of something that can be reined in a little bit. And she's a bureaucrat. That's, like I said, she does. I've confronted her about it before. How I tried to keep the meetings going and be efficient, and it was more of a protracted. Let's really talk this out. And so that was really my only thing. Is there's times where there was alienation, at least somewhat. Made me uncomfortable, I guess. And maybe I've done that too. I don't know. But,
Well, and I appreciate your comment today about the limited funds.
yeah, I appreciate what he's saying, but at the same time, it's like,
Was it really relevant?
where, and it's like
Should
what
we
you're
have a
saying.
time limit?
Yeah. This is, it was really getting off.
No, we should.
Well,
Well, and so I guess I'm saying, that's my only concern. Is it could drag out longer than something could with Denise at times. That was always my biggest issue.
Cindy's very passionate. She's got a lot of experience. It's her about it into that.
It's like there's it's a little offset in the spectrum.
It is.
And even somebody like me, I don't have the experience that Denise does. In her years of work experience and boards and stuff. I was just trying to bring in a different perspective from a remodel or builder perspective with the education. I guess that's probably where when I was in charge of that board, I was trying to think of it not so much in a business way, but how do we make it so that people are happy to come back and not feel like we gotta wait for hours and hours. And that's where I started to feel uncomfortable, is when people have to wait when we could have got something done.
Yeah.
So that's,
When tonight was actually second.
I agree with everything both of you said. I think Denise on paper is much more qualified than Cindy. And I respect Denise a lot. She knows so much, but she can make meetings last twice as long as I have to. And
Well, I'm hearing a consensus here, and I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that we recommend to the mayor the appointment of Cindy Town. Toll. I knew it wasn't Towel, but, okay, it's Toll.
Actually, Toll House is pretty good, so
Oh,
So
that's,
okay. I don't want to do what we call these.
John?
I will do it if you want to, but
What?
when she asks why, I need to give her, what's the reason?
I think,
Because obviously we're choosing,
But I don't
on
know if we
paper.
are. I don't know if we are.
Okay. Oh, but you always have voted, okay.
And, tried to Cindy, but, Cindy was the other extreme. I don't really think she is. I've worked with Cindy in the neighborhood. I think she's really smart.
Mhm.
She's very dedicated and hardworking. And, she researches things. She'll really take it seriously. And, I think she'll be really good.
okay. I think it's great to have two candidates to choose from, and it's always a tough choice.
yeah.
I think with Denise, I think her input from the neighborhood association is invaluable. And I'm thinking keeping her in that capacity.
Right, because I go to those meetings, and Denise, frankly, just takes over, and when you say you don't want to hear what you call her, that's the problem. Nobody
Yes.
because she's so wonderful in so many ways. She has so much to give, but nobody wants to step on her toes.
Mhm.
And so,
I did.
yeah, you do.
Well, you didn't know you weren't there, but I did to the point where it was, I said, we need to keep, like what you did tonight, I would do that with Denise in a very polite, respectful way, but many times when I needed,
Well, what I mean is, you did when, I got the message when you said, hey, I was your frustration. I mean,
oh, yeah,
you know.
that might be
I
my
mean,
own
that came across,
insecurity,
right.
but it was because I just sometimes, like the person here gets lacking, and that's when you stop, but in this case, it was Denise taking the part where I have to say, okay, we need to move on, and it was, wait a minute, I'm not done, well, I'm trying to steer this.
And I see the dynamics in the steering committee and at the neighborhood association, and our chair and co-chair have always been such gentlemen. I would be much harsher on her. They give me a very strong facilitator to make her keep quiet. And she
Rob
would,
Crocker's quite good at it, I'm so
Yes.
impressed.
and she goes beyond the scope of what she's given, and because people are afraid to rein her in, she keeps taking an inch and an inch and another inch, and I find it really controlling and really difficult.
Mhm.
Well, I know Denise pretty well, I don't know Cindy, but if you feel like there's more than beyond restoring her house, and she knows preservation, she knows,
No, I don't think she knows preservation any more than I know preservation. She probably
But
knows
she has
it
a
better
steady-
than I do,
and even
because
though-
she's done more in her,
Yeah.
in her house. But, I can tell you that she would persevere, that people in the neighborhood were very supportive of her, doing this. She's very easy to get along with, but she's not a pushover. She has her own mind,
Mhm.
but, she's a consensus builder, and,
That's
she's a
what we need.
worker.
I mean,
Mhm.
this board needs to be a resource for anyone who comes before it. And she has come before this board a couple times.
Is that still before us, your motion?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Was that a second?
I
Okay, do we need to take a roll call vote?
Raise your hand. No.
I'm sorry, Christine.
That's your stress more than anything.
Oh, Colin, well, I didn't give a reason, she says why did it to
I
Cindy?
think it's probably because, her involvement in so many things. What do you-
I wouldn't, what I've
I feel
been
like
told,
anytime I say something to her, it's gonna sound.
yeah, I know.
Unless,
What-
unless we just say, we don't think.
But that's part of what he's saying is that you guys say this is how, I don't know.
People in the neighborhood, in the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association have said to me on occasion that, you know, when Denise is talking, you don't know where the neighborhood association's opinion stops and hers starts. And they're concerned about that.
But see, she's not representing the neighborhood on page 8.
No,
No, but I see that.
That- yeah.
Also, her involvement with Rose Farm, Welcome Memorial Association.
It's just involved.
And she's got a lot of things going on. That was my question to her. Maybe good for her. It is redemption.
She's really good.
Well, it's like
Well-
you asked me and I was willing to do it. I was even wondering in my life, I haven't had anything since being on the county board. Thinking I need to serve or something, so I have nothing other than too many kids and working all the time. That's my life. So I feel like there was an obligation for me to do something, and it seemed that there was that timing. So that was a blessing to me because I'm happy to do it. But I'm not involved in the GABA stuff. My only other thing besides kids is church. So not on this, and this. I'm not spread out to where it always becomes. I don't know your guys' lives or how involved you are. I don't know a whole lot.
I'm sure glad that I'm not coaching two soccer teams anymore.
That was what Shelley wrote.
If we're done with this, I would, I don't, I mean, I know you two guys a little bit, but I don't know you at all, and
I
I'd
don't know
like
you.
to know, like, just a little bit about you, so I could rely on your expertise and know what your background is, you know, what your
In a
interests
nutshell,
are. Yeah.
I've been a contractor for 14 years, doing remodeling, and a master's in architecture and focused on preservation. I have 6 kids, 20 years of marriage, and I'm broke.
Because he's a builder.
Remodeler. Remodeler. So that's me.
And
I
a
survived.
wealth of experience on the county historical
I
review.
did that for 7 years, I chaired for 3 years. And that whole time was with Denise, and I sparred, and I got frustrated.
Yeah.
And I had a good time with her too. But it was more of, each month was, how am I gonna keep this under control? So what my challenge was. So tell me about me.
Well, I'm completely different from you. I'm a lawyer, practiced 30 years. I'm been involved in chamber and rotary and I'm limiting my work life because I have too much room to volunteer work. And I've always loved old houses and lived in old houses and trying to get my own neighborhood designated as a historic district, which didn't happen, but which Gilmore was in the early 90s. Yeah, it was really nice, and we were just really concerned that with the increasing population that we saw coming into the city, that old houses were going to be knocked down, and structures were not that long compatible with the neighborhood, and we just wanted to get a grip on it. And so that's how I started getting involved by having a house in Wallace.
Where do you live now?
I live in this neighborhood, in McLaughlin neighborhood, right on the bluff.
So, if you're in the neighborhood, how many people are needed from the?
I'm the chamber
She's the
rep.
chamber. We asked her
Oh,
if she would be
okay,
the.
that's right.
neighborhood
Because I'm the at-large dude,
Yeah.
physically and geographically. I live in Los Angeles.
Oh, do you?
Well,
We need to have an attorney on the board at all
That is
times.
always
boards
helpful.
need an attorney.
No, actually,
You see what
uh,
Greg's been through with her lately?
Jim Nacita on the board was always able to give a highly focused legal perspective on the questions.
He's a land use lawyer. I'm not. I do civil litigation, so I really don't have any expertise in this stuff. I mean, it's easier for me.
What we do is
to
not
go to
land
meetings law,
use
Yeah.
either.
When they go to it right away,
Still have the house
you know, but this is not my area at all. But I try.
I slept at Holiday Inn last night.
Okay, so I'll call Denise tomorrow.
If you want to
Just
call
be-
her, then I'd say.
No.
Just say Todd said no.
I mean, one, they were worried about losing on the neighborhood association, and I mean, can I say that the board thought you were potentially divisive?
You can say that on my behalf. I think that's my concern. I should call.
I just feel that if I don't say the truth, I just
I
don't
know.
say it.
No, it's,
What would be your response? I mean, what would you say?
Well,
Or are you gonna put that off?
I'm gonna call him out for me. I'm gonna say the board thought, your background in neighbor association has been somewhat divisive and maybe not, I mean, I just have trouble saying anything other than that, that's my problem.
no, I think that's, I mean, the consensus we came to.
Well, she asked why,
Well, the device, I mean, I kind of feel if you say that she's the vice of the neighbor association, it comes back to me, and that causes me problems still with her. And I think we made this decision before I
Oh,
ever
right.
said that, so I would prefer staying away from that.
Okay.
It's-
And I do deal with it quite a bit,
And I have challenged her openly at a steering committee meeting. Actually, at a general meeting, I did once, she just was unbelievable. And so, I mean, I get along with her great, but I will publicly challenge her. And I've done it, and it's uncomfortable, but I'm one of the few people who will do it.
you still aren't giving me reasons.
All right.
And she says, why wasn't I
Come on,
chosen?
you gotta come up with something
Well,
else, but
you know,
you get paid to say
The
right
government,
words.
the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, sent two names, obviously, they took on both of you. We feel, Denise, that you're too involved in a lot of things, and Cindy has the qualifications to be here, and we wanted a new face, new manager.
Part of it is, even like when you guys interviewed me, I really didn't know that you wanted, or you would appoint me, or I didn't assume that, I just, maybe, and then when I didn't hear from you, I figured, well, that's fine. At least I should find out what we wanted. I think she kind of just assumes that she could get appointed because of whatever, I don't know. But she's a nice person. And you're right, she may not know much, but she's obviously lives there and she knows as much as anybody else.
And she's done a fabulous job.
And she'll do her homework.
She
She'll read
does, she
everything.
does.
So,
So,
be ready. I mean, I knew faces, I'm okay with that.
maybe that's it, a different perspective. Different perspective.
That sounds good.
Okay. I'll write this down.
Just looking for a different perspective. That's not offensive.
No,
Okay. Well, before we leave tonight, I know it's a late night, so I apologize for taking so long, but, just remember you can have the work session. We do need to do board elections formally, and then, I can do a real quick design committee update. I always like to want to keep the HRB, tagged in with what's going on the Main Street Design Committee. And then really voting on the 2009 work. So that's really the last two things we need to do.
How do we do?
Someone makes a motion. We need
you served for many years
a
as
chair
chair,
and
and
a vice
you're
chair.
very, very efficient.
We need a chair and a vice chair.
Like your emotion. You don't live here, man.
Hey, you're on the board.
I think to me that with the chair is
of us do. We rely on Christina. I would. I mean, I'm not unwilling to do that, but I would rely on Christina.
What I can't do as staff is shut down for public, but you can shut it
I
down.
wanted to a long time.
I know, and I think you would be much better at it. I'd like to nominate John, even though he's a
Are you,
newbie.
are you, the main question is, are you willing?
I wasn't willing the last time, and I did it for 3 years.
Dragged kicking and screaming.
Well, see, we have a nice thing for you.
Should get you a name tag too.
Can we get that pre-recorded?
It's my neighborhood.
Oh, that's where it is. Okay, I didn't see it. I was looking.
Staff report. That's where I always got confused on, is when I had to open and close a meeting. And then Linda Price, the staffer, John. I would be, I guess, yeah, collectively.
It would make me look short. That was your whole goal.
Amen.
You're only yourself to blame.
Like to get pretty efficient, but also respectful. Don't you have to vote on that? You can think twice.
Well, we
I need a second.
got a second. Ken seconded. Or Becky.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against?
3-1, you're in.
Okay, now we need a vice chair, or, our chair is absent.
Ken? I just know I'm gonna be gone a lot this.
If the economy keeps going the way it is, I might be floating down the river.
And that's what Ken does mostly.
That's what I do. Float down the river.
He's a river guy. He plays roll too sometimes.
That's a good life.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Okay.
If you don't wanna,
All right.
Okay, do we have a second? All in favor? All against? Any against? Motion carries. Okay, so we have our chair,
We have a
Don,
second.
and our vice chair.
I don't have the light.
Great.
Okay, you'll have to help me a lot.
That's fine. When we have our first land use, we always have that one up. I'll keep it up.
And I was looking for it tonight and didn't
Yeah.
see it.
I always had a page. Oh, I should look for that.
Oh, here, let me,
Well,
actually, I need to turn.
actually, Rick had that page
It
there.
was a thing that I would go through
Yeah,
each
and I
thing.
There's a thing that you have to read to open
Yeah, and I
Is it a
land
pre-
use hearings.
In fact, if you didn't have that, Christine, I could probably get it from Linda at the county.
She's got
It's
one
like a
that,
sheet, you have like a
Yeah.
sheet that you could, you could read it, or you could email it to me.
Okay, hold on.
I think we should put that on video and just play it.
Oh, yeah, it's like the, seatbelts and planes, we just press
Yeah,
play when it
yeah.
comes to the, so you know, Vicky, the preamble for a land use decision, it's like 2 pages, and everyone just goes, and then we listen to it.
And we can all stand up and do this number.
But it's done, you know, go to Luba, we said it, and we're fine. Of course, it was poor applicants just sitting there, and, you know, just listening to 5 minutes of lawyers arguing.
Show you how to pump up your-
This is fine. Okay, just a quick Main Street Design Committee update. The guidelines are being worked on for Main Street, and these are non-regulatory guidelines. These are basically helping property owners rehab appropriately, and will be adopted by the Urban Renewal Commission for their matching grant program. So that's what Main Street's working on. And probably next month or two, we'll send them to HRB with their general comments. But it is not, it's going to be a little different than kind of the historic review board's guidelines for new construction, because that was kind of very regulatory. Main Street's going to be a little more jazzier and hopefully less scary and very, trying to lay it out so it's a lot of pictures, trying to be approachable. So that's the,
I've seen the signs downtown too.
Main Street signs?
Yeah.
Yep, they're up. We got a couple from the state when we were designating this fall. So that's kind of a big thing. We'll be applying for some grants. One grant that we'll be applying for, which I'm really excited about, is we're going to be doing, taking our inventory forms and historic photos and putting together framed
on this now, I just have
Okay.
to check with him.
Okay.
Hey, aren't you guys meeting? Yeah.
So,
Stupid.
well, we need to create one. So, let me tell you what's going on. What we went from 2008. Our work program was pretty ambitious. We created the preservation grant program through the CLG matching grant. We applied for those funds, received them, used Forest Grove as our template because I think we're trying to copy their successful program. So that's kind of what we did. I think this year is watching how year one went and then seeing if we need to make some legacy tweaks or, or we think about copying Forest Grove. So we'll kind of maybe do some revisits maybe this fall before we start year two to see if we have any just general comments on how it was processed and if we want to make any different changes. Because this is brand new year one, so we're all novices on this one.
It's been good. I wish we could have given away all the money.
Well, we're
We're working
we're
on
working
it.
hard.
We've got some,
I'm
We have more.
going to be sending out a letter next month, letting all the property owners know about the April competitive grant. So we're going to do new lists for advertisement. What April is different than any other month because it's completely competitive. So siding repair, porch repair, chimney repair, everything can be a competitive grant in April. So whoever turns it in April, the board will look at all the proposals and compare them against each other. If there's more proposals than budget.
And what are the requirements of the home?
They have to be designated. And right now we're in the window portion, which is first come, first served each month. So we're right on the window portion of the money, which is basically 60% of our $27,000. And if you are doing window repair, you're pretty much guaranteed the money. And if you're doing window replacement, we'll allow it if you can show that the window is beyond repair. Or if you're taking like a vinyl window or an aluminum slider window and you want to replace it with a new window. So those are the parameters of this. And we're just taking it as they come in. So if you meet the grant requirements, maybe you can just keep doing it until you run out. And we have about $6,000 left, about $70,000 we put forward, and we have about $10,000 set aside for April. So whatever money we don't use in the $17,000 will go into April's competitive.
And it's a great map. There are no uniform requirements or anything.
Yeah, it's 50/50 matching grant for the first 2,000 and then 25% matching grant to a total of $3,000. And the average grant we're given is between $1,000 and $1,500. Most people don't have projects big enough to get the full $3,000 because they've been winter. So we've done 10 grants since September. And I've only finished out 2. And like Cindy isn't, they're not doing theirs, but we should get most of them finished out, so we find out. And then we cut the check, just like other people. We pay up front, you send us the invoice that was paid, we cut the check. So that's going on. We do have a certified local government grant. It's actually a program we need to get going on. We have window education for this spring. We have $500 or $800 set aside for the certified local government grant to bring someone in on a Saturday to talk about window repair.
that's almost like an old house workshop.
Yeah, like an old house workshop.
So does that happen?
We need to decide. So we have the grant money for it. We need to decide. Rick has offered to help this spring, Richard Halter, the previous McLaughlin person. He has the names of a few window repair people he wanted, that would be a good option. So I might, maybe at our next work session, I might ask if he could come in. He said he'd be willing to help. But I think the goal was, find a couple people about, basically just nuts and bolts of how to repair and like we could have, chosen with windows, which has a system, they put another, pane in there, they could do a dog and
Even on the
pony
double
show.
hung?
Yeah, they can do their dog and pony show.
Oh, I'd love to
You know,
see
we
that.
could have a vendor dog and pony show if we want, and we could have a, you know,
I hate to say it, but if it was
Right.
nice weather, you could have it outside like in the car and
yeah,
something that's people can actually walk.
yeah. So we could do both, we could do, you
Tell you
know,
what, the window vendors right now, they would be doing
Yeah.
that for free. I mean,
well, I'd
they
like to
get
do more
5
of the
of them a
window
day in the
vendors,
office.
I definitely would like to pay to get the person to teach people how to rebuild the windows, you know, teach the person the DIY stuff, because that's what I hear people want, you know, too. You know, how do I take my window down and do stuff?
The issue for me is whether you can put double panes and still pull the window up and down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They take the frame out, essentially, round it out, and they put the glass in.
Yeah, you know, then what we do is we'll pay 25% in our grant program for exterior wood stone windows. And a great article that we have on our website is basically looking at our value for energy. If you look at new wood storm window, net pocket of air, wood, old growth wood window, and the R value is pretty darn close to a brand new wood window, because you're looking at the dense old growth and then with the new storm, assuming that you've dealt with any weather storm, things like that. Right, so,
You get rid of those pockets for the
There's no-
weights.
Maybe there, I guess you could get.
well, the VV on the storm windows there. So, but just a great article to remind people that, if you're looking at that, and what really leaves your heat is your walls and your roof, is where you lose majority of your heat. If you want to attack energy efficiency, start with insulation, because they show these great pictures of, you know, thermal house, I mean, you get a thermal view, and you'll see, the windows are cold, but you're losing your heat just straight out the walls and the ceiling. So that's just a lot of good education, is people think, oh, if I just change my windows to vinyl windows, or new wood windows, I'll solve my energy efficiency issue, and it's not.
You can see in the winter when you see what snows, who
Yeah.
has snow on their roof and who
Yep,
doesn't.
exactly. So that's a great education. So anyway, if we want to do it during preservation month, then I can put window education for next work session and see if I can invite Rick to come up with this, and then we can come up with just a game plan of what we want, and who we want to talk to, and what we want to do by March to May. Because I think, you know, probably need to get advertising out to people. So, the preservation is grant is just going to be ongoing. The other two things that happened last year, which hasn't been finalized, but is still on track, is we finished the nomination of the Community National Register. We did an update and sent the nomination. We have new inventory forms. Those will go online, but they won't go online until our website gets updated. We're looking on the spring, we're going to have a July 1 in the state, so those all communal will be online, as will our new reconnaissance survey for downtown will be online, as will our walkway.
Is all of Kenema designated all homes in that district?
All homes that are 50 years or older are, see, in 1977, they had this primary, secondary, contributing, that's what they used to do national register.
Everything in that district is more than 50 years old would be designated.
Yeah, for the most part, and then things that are not 50 years old, we still have review authority, but we basically say it's on the staff level. So I'm working with Howard Clancy's house that was sold, it's a 1970s split entry, and we family bought it, and then we just between, I work on that at staff level, you know, just making sure it doesn't get more inappropriate for house building. I'm sure you can do that, but you know, so, well, everything has some level of use, some staff level, you know, and then the final one is the demolition delay and demolition by neglect, which is in limbo right now, because they went through the planning commission, was approved, but it has not gone to the city commission, and that's part of the citywide code updates, and to make all your findings of, you know, why you don't think it meets the criteria for demolition, but we have the ability not to do that.
And then there's also a provision in there that if you neglect the property to the point where
So
it
it
is
were,
being demolished by neglect, that the city has enforcement.
Like last year, well,
yeah,
guy pushed that through.
yeah, so what I'm really excited about is not necessarily demolition denial, it's the second, well, it's maybe two legs to it, I guess, but, is demolition by neglect, and it's not, it's in the Title 15 of our, city code, so it's not a land use is Title 17, it's in, our, basically our building code. It's, the way it's set up is, it is a subchapter to dangerous buildings, and it says if you are a landmark, you need to meet the dangerous buildings code and this code. And it basically says if you have demolition by neglect, which is defined as structural, they have this big definition, so it's not you are painting your house, and but it's that you are neglecting the point where the building is in jeopardy. We can potentially cite you to court to do stabilization methods to keep, make sure that it doesn't become a dangerous building that has to be forced demolition. And at the worst case scenario, if we ever had to, we could bring, but what that is, that's kind of the thing we have in our pocket as a city. So the goal is to never send them to court, and then to never have to leave the property, but you always kind of have that as your first, in reserve is your first discussion, to,
The Oregon City is also, I think, the last city around that actually recognizes the old hazardous building code. It's a code that hasn't been published since the 1970s. I think Guy has only 2 copies of it in existence.
yeah. But what this does is, that's what I'm most excited about, is we really tell people, if you buy an historic building, you have to make sure you keep it to a level where it's not gonna fall down. We're not making you restore your building, but we're making sure that you're not actively, disinvesting. So that will go to, the city commission in April, May, when they do their, meeting our city level campaigns. It was approved by the planning commission, we had hearings, the planning commission was very supportive, so. And, I know one of the city commissioners, was very supportive, because he was the one that pushed the project through, and that's good. So, this was his baby, so, definitely have that. So that's not really on this 2008 agenda, so, other than the continuing the grant program and the window education, what do you want?
I think we've got the inventories updated pretty much everywhere now, which was a big thing before.
Old house workshops.
Yeah, I mean, it says that
Yeah.
other education is what you
Yeah.
want.
If you could take something onto the windows also, maybe more educational type things, and have it all as a one-day event or a half-day event.
I don't know about a one-day event. I mean, you're getting into almost a craft fair that,
Well, that's,
If-
was used to be.
really?
You don't remember?
No, I wasn't here.
So there'd be just lots of vendors there.
There were, yeah, lots of vendors, and then you have workshops that would last about an hour apiece. It was very informative, and it was always done at Pioneer Center.
No, this helps with things different.
Maybe not here.
Well, I think, I'm more than happy to help with that. I think the reason we've never done an old home forum is, we've never gotten kind of support from outside of this group to put it on. I think it's always been a daunting task. And maybe it's something we need to partner with nonprofit neighborhoods to do.
Sounds
Well, and it was something that we used to partner with Old Home Forum,
Right.
which doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know if the neighborhood associations would partner with something like that.
We can put these on.
I don't know.
It almost to
The
me seemed like
the
a
Canadian
separate
Neighborhood Association
project, and
has
you kind of invite
about 5
people who
people
Yeah, I think this should be like probably similar, maybe all things, but,
I'm
I
not
mean, the window
sure
thing's
what
gonna
kind
happen,
of
right?
that kind of way, but
Yeah, and this may be more like longer policy of how we want to do. I mean, what I can do in work session is kind of spell out all the things that we currently do for education, and maybe we can do an audit of what
But I think we
you
need
know,
some action.
I would definitely get value out of that to see. Because Denise said kind of small things, there may be small things that are missing. We have kind of information, we can kind of repackage it and, send it out. And we put together an Oregon City Next a couple of years ago, which just was a 10-page thing, folding thing that just had a lot of information. And Denise has asked for other copies in years past to just send from the Boston Neighborhood Association newsletter. I mean, we can put those kind of things together. But
What about sending out flyers to people with historic properties, just saying, here's your inventory form? Is there a lot of people that have properties that don't even know they're
And we do that, we have a welcome wagon packet that we do for all new property owners, because we get tax assessor data now. That was one of our previous, work plans. So now I get quarterly lists from GIS, lists 5 to 6 homes that changed hands. And then we send out a welcome wagon packet, and it has introductory letter, and it just has a big stack of that and stuff, and the inventory form. But one thing we could do, I mean, I have to cost it out, but is, we have about 500 designated properties in Oregon City, and maybe we could just put in the email half of them. Because I have, I have a resource list for vendors, I have the circle beaver policies, I have the,
Fences and windows.
yeah, and I have some just basic information of what makes the historic district special, what's the history of Laughlin. I mean, just have a lot of those type of things. So I think that's another thing we can look at.
Many, there's people, some pride in the property.
So what if I just put, window education and preservation grant, what if I said, education resource audit? It's like, as a,
just look at what's there and stuff.
yeah, as a, and then give direction on what we're missing. Because I don't know if there's,
Next time.
yeah, as a work plan, I have to find out what's missing and make recommendations for new types of education. And then, I guess 4 is work with the neighborhood associations for a new old home forum. Fall, summer. The other thing, I want to add is, I will be going part-time next fall, in winter, I'm expecting again.
Oh, congratulations.
So, I'll always be, running the HRB, so I'm not gonna be any 2 months on the phone, but, so I'll always be your staff person for HRB, but I'll be in the office 1 day a week, and I'll be working at home. So, I definitely can do a lot of these things, but I don't think, especially with the home forum, I don't think I can take that. The number one rule of clean up, the window thing I can definitely help out, so just wanted to give you that.
You do?
September 26th.
That's why we
Well,
had
you
a
better
work
get
session
home.
4 weeks ago.
No, actually, I have a